This is the Global Travel Channel podcast show, and I am your host, Mark Philpott. How are you going, everyone? I hope you're all well out there in podcast listening land, and we're here with another show. My name's Mark Philpott, and on the show I get to talk to people all across the world about their amazing travel experiences. Yes, we get up close and personal. We don't just find out about destinations and things that have people done, but we find out how it changed people's lives, how they made these decisions to quit their job and go traveling for the rest of their life, or how they decided to start a business on the road. We talk about it all here on the Global Travel Channel. Now, if you love my guest today, don't forget to vote for him on the Global Travel Channel Podcast Awards. Yes, we've got our inaugural awards this year happening in June. That's just next month. And all you need to do is go to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com under the awards page, and you can vote for any one of my podcast guests that have been on the show. Yes, all you need to do is click on the category, put your vote in. You have one vote per category. And on June the 9th, I will be selecting the winners of the inaugural Global Travel Channel Podcast Show Awards. It's getting exciting, folks. We're getting closer and closer to that date. Now, today's guest, he was in a job in the middle of London that he didn't really enjoy. So he decided to quit that and take on a rather spectacular and unusual travel experience. Let's go and find out all about it right now with my guest today. His name's Oli Broom. Oli, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be here.
How are you today, mate?
I'm pretty good. I had a nice dog walk this morning, gathered my thoughts, and I'm looking out over beautiful English Cotswolds hills from my desk, which is currently in lockdown in my bedroom. And the sun is shining, blue sky. So yeah, all is well.
So what I get from that is you've locked your desk down in the bedroom. Is that right?
Yeah, sorry, that wasn't very well phrased, was it? No, I'm in lockdown. I'm in lockdown. And my desk, my bedroom is doubling as my headquarters at the moment. So yeah.
Okay, well, I was going to say that I'm glad you're in lockdown. The dog's probably still out running around the Cotswolds, is he?
The dog is. I can actually see her just down. Yeah, just trying to escape the garden. So
okay,
we'll see where she is at the end of this podcast. She might be a long way away.
Fantastic. Now, you've probably made a lot of people jealous already, telling us where you're from and where you are at the moment, and it's a beautiful part of the world around there. What do you love about it so much?
Yeah, it is very beautiful, and I am aware how lucky I am, and under these circumstances. It's there's lots of space. I moved up here from London about 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And obviously, I love the space. I grew up in the countryside, so I love the being outside, going for walks when I'm able to coerce my young children into doing that. Escaping London was at the time, it was our sort of priority, really. My wife and I had just spent 6 months living in a very remote part of Romania, in a tiny village, and we had an orchard sort of heading out of the garden up towards the forest, and we used to walk. You could walk wherever we wanted, and we came back to our tiny 2-bed flat in London, and felt like we really needed to escape. It was a tough reintroduction into modern life. So we escaped to the countryside and been up here ever since. Yeah, it's a very beautiful part of the world.
So I'm interested to know, has your health improved since you moved out of the city again?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I wouldn't say clearly improved. Possibly, but I've not noticed any improvement. I've always been relatively healthy.
I guess what I was getting at was from a stress point of view, is it's obviously a lot stressless living in the countryside versus living in the middle of London, yeah?
Well, yes, I suppose so. Although my move to the countryside coincided with having kids, So that's something to raise the stress levels as well. Yes, I suppose there's a bit of a trade-off there probably. So, yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice. Quality of life out here is great. But I loved London as well. London was great, and I miss it for all the things that it brings me. The access to culture, the museums and theatre, cinema, friends, all that kind of stuff. I didn't find it too stressful. But I certainly prefer. I'm a country boy. I like being out in the middle of nowhere. As far as that's possible in England. Pretty densely populated island we're on here.
London is a great city, and I remember my days when I was living in Europe that I spent a lot of time over there in the weekends, and I always found that it was a great place to go and visit for a few days and be able to leave again, and get out and get back to somewhere else rather than being in the hype of it all the time. I wouldn't imagine what it'd be like kind of living in amongst it all the time, getting on the tube every day and going through that sort of stuff.
I think a lot of people feel like that, and if I think the clue is in the fact that when we were living in London, every weekend we looked forward to escaping to go and stay with, parents, in-laws, friends, whatever, who didn't live in London. So yeah, it was always like 4 or 5 days in the week in London, and then go and try and find a friend to stay with for the weekend out of London. So that I suppose the clue is in that sort of like pattern of life, isn't it? Really. It was good to get out. It was good to get out.
Okay, well, before we get into any more details and help the UK Tourism Board to sell their hotel rooms in London, we better get on with some other things to talk about. And look, I've got to say that I'm really excited to be chatting with you today. I classify you as another crazy Englishman on my show because I've had a couple of your fellow countrymen, one who sailed a dinghy laser sailboat around the Great Britain coastline last summer.
Yeah, fantastic.
And also another Englishman from the Leeds area who cycled around the world alone. So they've been on my show. So you're the third intrepid explorer from the UK.
Fantastic! It's good to be the latest instalment. I would obviously never classify myself such, but we'll see. And your listeners can perhaps judge at the end of the show.
Well, they will do, because we have the Global Travel Channel Podcast Awards going on at the moment, and in June the 9th, all of my listeners are going to be voting for their favourite guests, so no pressure on you today at all. Yeah.
No pressure at all.
So, have you done many podcast shows before?
I've done a few, not for a little while. I did quite a lot when I first finished my bike ride that we're going to talk about, I think. But not for a while, so I've done a few, But it was,
right.
on my dog walk this morning, I was refreshing my memory and harking back, and it always makes me quite emotional. Thinking back to that time on the road, it was a very different time of life, but great fun, and so I've mentally prepared by thinking back to it this morning.
Okay, fantastic.
The least I can
now,
do.
We'll start off with this one because I always offer my guests the opportunity to dedicate their episode to someone special in their life. So who would you like to dedicate your show to today?
Oh, I think it's got to be my two sons, who
Okay.
I hope inherit a love of bicycle travel, but they're under no pressure to do so. But I think
No.
I'll dedicate it to them.
And you're not going to tell me their names are Penny and Farthing, are you?
No, no, definitely not.
No.
Reggie and Ted.
Reggie and Ted, fantastic. What
Reggie
a
and
couple
Ted.
of great names.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, thank
fantastic,
you.
Reggie and Ted.
Yeah.
They'll probably end up playing rugby for England, I'd say, with names like that.
Not with a father like me, they won't. No, sadly, I'm someone who did not play very good rugby when I was growing up. Probably because I was, my nickname was A4 because if I turned sideways, I was like a piece of paper. You couldn't see me. I was not built for rugby. More of a cricketer.
More of a cricketer, okay. Well, maybe they'll be striding out into the middle of Lords one day.
That would make me very happy. But again, they're under no pressure to do that. But that would be a hell of a day if they were opening the batting for England against Australia at Lords. That would sort of be job done.
You're not putting any pressure on them at all, are you? Saying
no
that?
pressure at all. They're no pressure. 1 and 3, I think I'd be struggling to pressure them into that just now. And be a bit
probably you want you'd probably want Reggie to score a century in his first Test match as well, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if he was gonna open the batting, he's got to score 100, doesn't he?
Right. Okay, fantastic. Now, how old are the kids?
They're one and three.
1 and 3. Okay, well they've got a little bit of time before they put the pads on yet.
They have, yeah. They have.
Yeah.
Although I've been smacking, been smacking Reggie all over the garden. He's been bowling at me during lockdown, so he's getting his bowling arm in.
Fantastic, good stuff. Now, when I research my guests who are coming on the show, I go through a lot of details to find out what we might have in common. And in your case, mate, about the only thing we have in common is that we probably both use toothpaste.
Toothpaste, yeah, yeah. Explain.
Well, the gist of that joke was that I couldn't find anything else that you and I have got in common, basically.
Oh, I see. That's sad, isn't it? That's very sad. What about a love of New Zealand?
Well, hang on a minute. I was only kidding because I'm actually a big cricket fan and I'm a cyclist, and I've also dabbled in philanthropic projects across the world. So I think we've got quite a bit to talk about. Yeah.
There we go. I'm pleased. I thought you were being serious then. My sense of humour has obviously eluded me over 6 weeks on my own.
Yeah, it'll catch up though. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll keep your practice. We'll keep your practice on the show. Now, you've talked a lot already about bicycles, and that's going to be a big theme of the show today because you did something rather crazy on a bicycle. But before we get talking about that, do you remember the first time you ever rode a bicycle solo?
Oh, I'd be lying if I said I did.
Right.
But I do remember my first bike. It was a BMX Boxer, and it was bright red with yellow handlebars. And we had this kind of circular driveway thing outside makes it sound very grand, but it was tiny. And I used to go round and round and round on my BMX Boxer. I seem to remember making up a story that my bike could actually punch people because it was called a BMX Boxer, and sort of some vague memories of thinking that people believed me, but they obviously didn't. But yeah, that was my first bike, and loads of bike rides.
How old were you then?
Sorry?
How old were you then?
I probably would have been about 5, I'm guessing. I don't think I was a particularly early starter. My eldest Reggie, he's on a pedal bike already at sort of three and a bit. I wasn't as good as him on a bike in early days. But that was probably my first cycling memory. But yeah, loads of family bike rides and cycling around the local villages with my friend Simon growing up. Those are great memories actually.
So whereabouts, what area of the UK was that then?
I grew up in a tiny village called Cookham, which is on the Thames, about 30 miles from London, 30 miles west of London, in sort of rural Berkshire, or suburban Berkshire, I suppose actually. It was a lovely part of the world.
So
Stanley Spencer is the most famous resident, former resident of Cookham, the artist. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I have. I've heard the name. Yeah. Okay, so that's where he's from.
Cookham boy. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there must be a pub there named after him, is there?
I don't think. I was just trying to think actually. No, there's a museum which is his old house just off the high street.
Right.
At one point, Cookham did have the most pubs per capita in the UK. You could barely walk 20 meters without hitting a pub. Within about 100 meters of my house, there were 4.
Right.
And yeah, but I think that most of those have been turned into flats and probably gastro pubs and that kind of thing now.
Do you go back there regularly?
I don't live too far from there now. I live about an hour from there now. My folks live about 10 minutes from where we used to live. So go back very occasionally. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to kind of go a little bit further forward after you've had your BMX Boxer and you've been riding around that area with your mate as well. And we're going to wind the clock back to basically the last part of the first decade of this century when you were working in London. And you got to a stage in life where you started to make a fairly large decision on wanting to change. First of all, what were you doing in far as your work in London?
I was involved in commercial real estate in London. I worked for a big chartered surveying firm, and I was in the sort of residential development department. So that's
Right.
why I was involved in valuing residential developments and commercial developments, and didn't particularly love it. It was fine. It was fine. I sort of quite enjoyed it, but I knew that it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. So I decided to quit, and
Right.
I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So I thought
Mm.
heading off for a bit of an adventure was perhaps the next best thing to do.
How old were you then?
I was 29 when I
29. Okay.
when I quit my job, so I was past it. Uh, I should have done it about 5 years earlier, I think. But no, I mean I wouldn't change it. I had a great time actually in my 20s. It was good fun, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do with my life, and I wasn't quite sure, so I headed off around the world.
So I was going to say that it wasn't a midlife crisis exactly, was it?
No, no, certainly not. That came a lot earlier for me. Probably around 25, and then it took me 4 years to pluck up the courage to do it.
Yeah.
It was probably just, if I'm honest, it was probably just the wrong career choice. I sort of just fell into it really. I mean, I applied for this graduate scheme, and sort of because it was what everyone else was doing really.
Yeah.
It just wasn't quite right for me.
So what about, say, late teens, early 20s? What was the dream career? What did you really want to do besides being a professional cricket player, I guess?
Yeah, I did absolutely want to be a professional cricketer. That's exactly what I wanted to be. Wasn't quite good enough. Two of my schoolmates made it. Not schoolmates. Andrew Strauss was a few years above me. I knew him a bit, and he made it quite nicely.
Yeah.
And then another lad in my school, Jamie Dalrymple. He played cricket for England in the World Cup and a few one-day internationals. And I used to open the batting with him at school. So yeah, that was my dream, but I wasn't quite good enough. So it wasn't nearly good enough. So one of the things I actually wanted to be, which I sort of thinking about last night as I was looking at doing a bit of garden design stuff for a house we're about to move into, was I wanted to be a landscape gardener, landscape architect, landscape garden designer. So that I used to have a little gardening business in the villages locally, around the ages of sort of 17 to kind of 21. So end of school and throughout, and we used to do do things like lay patios and clear out, scrub, and mow lawns, and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, it sort of got me in. I mean, that's obviously far from being a garden designer, but anyway, that's what was the dream for about 3 or 4 years anyway, and then just didn't quite do it. But I don't have any regrets at all. I would have been a terrible garden designer.
Hey, I'd like to go back to your fledgling cricket career if I can for a second, because did you have any thoughts about immigrating to Tasmania? Because they would have had you.
Would they? Because they were struggling for cricketers, were they? And people like Ricky Ponting.
I think they still are.
Are they?
Not only
captain of the national teams from Tassie, isn't he?
Yeah, but that's only by default, right? So.
Is it? Yeah. No, I would have. Emigrating to Australia and playing for Australia would have been a hell of a lot harder thing to do than play for England at the time.
Mind you, we were just talking about a city before we came on air that you probably would have got into the first 11 team. That was Toowoomba. You probably would have made it there.
I would have made it into the Toowoomba for first 11. Yes, but I actually doubt I would. because I've played a bit of cricket in Australia, and the quality of club cricket is really good.
Yeah.
No, I'm not sure I would have made it into that.
Now, look, a lot of people listen to my show because a lot of guests like you have made these life-changing decisions, and a lot of people listen to the show to kind of get a little bit of insight and I guess also inspiration behind how you came to make the decision, what it was like after you made the decision, how long did it take you to make the decision, what was all the flack from your friends and family members and that. Can you walk us through what happened in your case in terms of when you made the decision to quit the job?
Yeah, I it took me a long time to make the decision. I've sort of touched on that already. So I was probably thinking about it from the age of about 25, and then it took me 3 or 4 years to really to make the jump. And I suppose, if I'm honest, the main thing holding me back was the financial element, actually, because I was struggling to save any money. I didn't have any savings at all, and I was struggling to save any money living in London. I mean, I'm not particularly disciplined about that anyway, but I certainly wasn't in my 20s. I was still like going out, seeing friends, like relatively busy social life, and so I wasn't sort of committing to trying to save money, and I was just doing very badly at that. So that was the main thing holding me back, was the sort of that financial worry about how am I going to fund, if I go on an adventure, how am I going to fund it, which was kind of silly looking back on it, because as soon as I did make eventually I just made the decision, right, I've got to quit, and then I will find a way of making it work. And it was actually a conversation with a mutual friend of mine and my dad's, who I had a meeting with him in a pub in not far from home, and he's quite a successful entrepreneur, and he said, look, if you want to try and get this bike ride, funded, or trying to get sponsorship for it or something, you've got to be 100% committed in your mind to doing it, and the way to do that is to quit your job. So that's basically what I did, and I'd been trying for months to sort of try and get like a way of funding the trip, and I hadn't managed it. And about a week after I quit my job, I managed to persuade a couple of companies to sort of sponsor me to do this bike ride to Australia, and that was the way I funded it. I'm convinced still that it was because I quit my job and because I was so desperate. I mean, I had a sort of departure date in mind, which was about 3 months after I quit my job, and so I'm convinced that it was that sort of leap into the unknown that was the reason that I was successful in finding someone to help me fund this adventure that I wanted to go on.
Yeah.
I mean, friends were incredibly supportive. My parents I told, and I actually told them by email because I knew I could explain my reasoning better. So I wrote them an email, and then I got a phone call about 5 minutes after I sent it, and floods of tears. my mum was in floods of tears, and then we hung up, and then I think about 10 minutes later I got another one, sort of saying, actually no, I think probably on the first phone call even, she said, obviously we're behind you and we fully support you, and that was really important. Obviously, having a supportive family and friends, and they were all amazingly supportive. It was great. It was slightly before the days of sort of Instagram and, well, Twitter was going, but it was very, very early days, and Facebook and stuff was going. But it was, so in terms of documenting and keeping in touch with friends, it was a bit more difficult. But that was normal back then, right? It wasn't anything. I wasn't harking after some sort of something that wasn't yet invented.
So you better tell my listeners exactly what it was that you quit your job to go and do, because we know that it's a bicycle ride. But what was the plan? What was the route of this bicycle ride you were going to do?
Yeah, so I feel like this is turning into a cricket show. I actually cycled from Lord's Cricket Ground in London to the Gabba in Brisbane, in Australia, on the east coast of Australia, to go and watch a cricket match, basically. For those of your listeners who aren't familiar with cricket, this is perhaps where your sort of like eccentric Englishman bit comes in, because I carried a cricket bat with me all the way, and I played cricket tried to play cricket in every country along the way too. And so it was kind of fun, bit silly really, but the actual journey was tough at times. It was great fun, but it was tough at times, and so especially with a cricket bat strapped to my bike. But that was the idea, to go and watch the Ashes cricket series in Australia. Which started in November 2010,
Mm.
So I left in October 2009 to go and do that.
Ollie, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second because I've got a large listener base in the United States and they've got no idea what cricket is. So do you want to explain the game of cricket in 60 seconds?
Oh my gosh. You have 11 players on each side. Everyone wears white, generally. And you have a bowler, which is the equivalent of a pitcher. And you have 2 batsmen, whereas in baseball you only have 1 batter. And the bowler throws the ball at the batsman, and the batsman tries to hit it. And he gets different number of points or runs for the different places or ways that he or she, I should say, hits the ball. And the aim of the bowler is to try and get the batsman out, just like in baseball. It's basically a more complicated version of baseball, and I would argue a lot better version of baseball. I do love baseball, but I was a bit of a Mets fan growing up, a New York Mets fan growing up. But I do like baseball, but cricket is far superior, obviously.
Mm. You're going to get hundreds of social media comments coming at you, mate, after that last comment about baseball.
I know. I do love baseball. The thing I should say about cricket and America is that the first international game of cricket was actually between Canada and the United States in Philadelphia. So that's the first thing. So a little bit of familiarity there, and there's also a fantastic cricket team in Compton in LA, which is made up of lots of ex-cons and people with tough upbringings, and it's called the Compton Cricket Club. So people could search for that and have a look. And there's the guy who founded it. He's a fantastic character, and he says about cricket something like, cricket's the baddest game in the whole world. Yeah, something like in his sort of street slang. It's a great club. Yeah, so there's a bit of familiarity there with cricket in America, but I do agree it's foreign to a lot of people on that side of the pond.
I've just listened to your description of the game. Is that how you're going to tell Reggie and Teddy how it is? Is that your description to your
It was pretty poor attempt at explaining cricket, wasn't it? No, I think with them I might be standing like on the boundary of a cricket field and actually able to say this person is doing that, or this and that person's doing So I think it should be a bit easier, and perhaps I would have thought about it a bit more than just no pressure, Mark. I thought you said no pressure on this show. It's literally one of the hardest things to be asked to do is explain the game of cricket. And I've made
it's funny that, isn't it, when it's been such a passion of yours for your entire life and you find it difficult to explain your passion. I find that extraordinary.
I suppose the way I like to think of cricket is it's like a story that unfolds throughout the summer. So because obviously you play, you tend to play a series of cricket matches. It's like this sort of narrative that unfolds, and it's it ebbs and flows throughout the whole summer. Sometimes your team are up, sometimes they're down, and because the matches last 5 days, and so you might have 5 matches of 5 days. You've got 25 days of cricket, and it's like this, as I say, this narrative that ebbs and flows, and that I think is the most appealing thing about cricket.
Okay, so you quit the job, you decided that you were going to cycle a bike to Australia to watch a cricket series, and you gave yourself about 3 months of planning time before you left. So tell us what you did in that 3 months. How did you make a plan for this journey?
I wrote to various people all over the world asking if they would put me up when I reached their city or their town or So that was one of the first things I did. I'm conscious of harking on about cricket, but I wrote to lots of cricket bodies in different countries and asked them to host me and asked them to ask them if I could play a game of cricket when I got to their country. So I heard back from countries like sort of the cricket boards of Hungary, cricket boards of Czech Republic. Sorry, not Czech Republic, Austria. You know what I'm saying there? I didn't go through the Czech Republic. Bulgaria, Turkey, all those kinds of countries. So I did all that. And then, of course, there was this sort of cycling element. And actually, if I'm honest, I didn't spend that much time preparing for that. I didn't do any training. I made sure I had a good bike that fitted me, so it was ergonomically fitted for me. A good saddle, very important, with a bony bottom like mine was back then. And that was basically, that's sort of kind of all I did really. I mean, made sure I had the funds in place. There was a bit of stuff to do with the sponsorship because I got these couple of companies who sponsored me. Needed a bit of branding stuff done, but there's very little really. It was just more mental preparation and I suppose looking at possible routes. I was trying to look for the flattest route possible through Europe because I hadn't done any training. So I decided that following the thin blue lines on the map would be the best course of action. Following the rivers. So I basically cycled all the way through Europe following rivers. So yeah, there was a bit of preparation, but to be honest, it was more of a waiting game.
And you went to Africa as well.
I did go to Africa, yeah. So I cycled down through Europe, through Turkey, and then down through the Middle East. Not something you'd want to do these days. Through Syria, and then onto Jordan, and then I got as far as Khartoum in Sudan before I stopped cycling. And the aim was to get down to the east coast of Kenya and then get a boat across there, but I failed miserably, having taken so long going through Europe and Africa, basically having too much fun and meeting too many nice people, and got to Khartoum, and then I did hop on a plane to go to Mumbai and carry on my journey from there.
Okay, now how does one budget for a cycling trip from the UK to Australia?
The way I budgeted back then was stabbing in the dark. Just going like, right, what do I reckon I'll need? I worked out I probably could get by with like between £5 and £10 a day. So that was how I did it back then. These days I'd have far more of an idea about how to budget for it. And I think it's really about, what food you think you'll need. And then if you're trying to camp every night, obviously that's, if you're camping wild, then that's free. But there are going to be times when you're really going to struggle to camp wild. So, what might you reasonably expect to spend on basically the most rubbish accommodation you can possibly find? And I sort of reckoned before I left that I budgeted to spend about 10 nights a month in kind of something that I needed to pay for, but that was super cheap. And actually, in the end, I didn't spend anything like that many nights in most countries in somewhere with a roof over my head that I had to pay for. I used a website called Couchsurfing a lot, which has kind of been usurped by people like Airbnb. But Couchsurfing was fantastic because it's free, and it's basically a community of people who just are interested in meeting travelers, meeting other travelers, or people travelers who are interested in meeting local people as well. Right. So I stayed on a lot of people's sofas or spare rooms, for free, and it was a great way of meeting local people, and a great way of people in different parts of the world to hear stories about my travels. I mean, far be it for me to say they were particularly interesting, but I did make some friends who will be friends for life just from sleeping on their sofa.
Did you leave a girlfriend behind in the UK?
No, I didn't. We broke up a good few months before I left.
So as soon as you told her what you were going to do, she said, "I'm out of here."
Yeah, I'm scrunching up my face right now because it's still a bit of a funny one. Yeah, quit my job, and then quit my job, and then sort of told her this is my plan. I like to think sensitively, but anyway, it didn't go down particularly well. And I think it was, to be honest, I think if I hadn't have ended it, then she would have done probably shortly afterwards. So.
Did you send her an email?
I did it in person.
Oh, good man! I was going to say I was really upset that you had to send your parents an email. I thought you might have given them a call.
There was a good reason for it. I'm much better in, as your listeners will be hearing at the moment, I'm much better in writing than talking.
Now, about the ride, there was also a charity component to it. Can you tell us about that and how that came about?
Yeah, there was. So I was raising money for. I should say, by the way, that I'm not one of these people who claims that that was my reason for doing this adventure. My reason for doing this adventure was I'm afraid to say, mainly selfish. I wanted to go off and have an adventure, but it's a really nice byproduct of the trip. And I had this friend who had a bad accident in his early 20s, and he became paralyzed. So I was raising money for a charity that he does a lot of work with, the British Neurological Research Trust. So I raised money for them and for the Lord's Taverners, who are a sporting, mainly cricket charity here in the UK. And raised money for them. And it was a really, as I say, it was a really nice byproduct of the whole trip. And I raised around £100,000 in total.
Good effort. Good effort. Now, did anyone put up their hand to go cycling with you from London? Do you have any of your mates come along and say, "Hey, listen, I'll come with you"?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much all of them said that, and then of course they start dropping like flies. But I cycled out of London with about 15 of us, I think, 16 of us, something like that. And we cycled for 2 days down to the ferry in Dover, in the south coast of England, and they all turned round. And I remember very vividly thinking, they're all turning round and sort of cycling back to the station and going back to their, day jobs on Monday morning. This was sort of Sunday evening, going back to their day jobs on Monday morning, and I was carrying on going. It was kind of bizarre, this bizarre feeling of like just abandoning my friends. And as I walked around the corner at the ferry terminals, having said goodbye to them, I remember blubbing for the first time of many, blubbing away, thinking, what have I done? Especially as my knee was giving me so much pain. Even after those first couple of days cycling, I was in a lot of pain. But so that was the first cycling with friends, and then I had a mate come out, and we cycled through 4 countries in about 2 weeks through Europe, and then the next friend to join me was just after I got out of hospital in Thailand, and then so I spent 52 weeks cycling on my own and 8 weeks cycling with other people.
Right.
And the last 3 weeks I was cycling with a Hungarian guy that I met in Budapest, who was a chap named Lotzi. He's become a great friend over the years, and at the time he had this kind of blog, and he would write about interesting stories that he found in Budapest. And he was introduced to me and wanted to do it was a video blog, so a video podcast type thing, and he wanted to film me leaving his city. So he did, and then he said, "I want to come to Serbia and see you next weekend in Belgrade." So he did. He came to Belgrade, and he filmed me playing a game of cricket with the Serbian national team. And then he said, "I really want to come to Australia all the way. I want to cycle all the way to Australia with you. There's just one problem. I've just got married, and my wife is telling me I can't go." And quite rightly, Borry was telling him he couldn't go. So anyway, he basically organised the filming of my entire trip through so online through various forums, and which was amazing. And then he came to cycle the last 3 weeks with me and filmed the last 3 weeks into Brisbane across the outback. And,
wow.
So it was a great adventure. That great fun. But there, so that was it.
I want to go back to the departure if we can, just for a second, because I'm having a vision of you kind of starting off. You started off from Lords, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Below the media centre at Lords. Yeah. Yeah,
right. So that was quite I guess that was quite an emotional thing in itself for you, and understanding the history of cricket and Lords and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it was. It was a very special. This is like middle of October in England, so any cricket ground is pretty much shut up. There's no cricket going on. It's coming into it's deep into the autumm.
Well, it would have been raining, wouldn't it? Was it raining?
Raining, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was actually a very nice day. I've got a photo. I've got a photo in front of me here of that day, and it was bright. It was bright blue sky. So for once.
Yeah.
So it was really emotional, and made even more so by having, there were obviously the 15 or so of us cycling, but there were quite a few other friends there, and family friends, my family, mum and dad and sister, and mates with new kids and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was cool. We had bacon butties, bacon sandwiches up in the media centre to send me on my way, and
fantastic.
yeah, it was great. It was very special, and as I say, made even more special by the sort of that Lords is a very very special place. So,
Did any famous English cricket celebrities turn up to wave you off?
Sadly not. No.
No?
Sadly not.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
Not at all. Well, if we get to the end of my journey, you'll hear who was there at the end, but no one at the start.
Oh, I don't think we'll get to the end. We're just going to talk about all the middle parts. I think that's going to be interesting. Okay, so you left Lords. You obviously didn't get bitten by any dogs, neighbours' dogs or anything on the way up because you had 15 mates with you.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
you got yourself, you got down to the ferry. What was the kind of emotional, you said you blubbered a bit when they left, but once you kind of pulled yourself together and you got across the channel, what were some of those emotions then? Was it a kind of, okay, head down and away I go, or were you still feeling pretty, why am I doing this?
Yeah, no, I felt like that for quite a number of days actually. To be honest, I felt pretty. I questioned my decision for quite a number of days. Partly because I was in so much pain. My knee. I mentioned I didn't do any training, so my one of the reasons because I knew I had a bad knee, and I paid the price in those first couple of weeks. But it was amazing how quickly it then went. So that I think that pain exacerbated my sense of questioning what I was doing, but leaving behind a pretty good job and all your mates and going off and doing something on your own that you've never done anything like before. I mean, I had never cycled anywhere particularly like far away before. Yeah, it was quite a risky decision.
So where did the actual idea come from? Like where don't tell me you're at a pub one night with some mates and you're obliterated when you made the actual decision. Hey, I'm going to cycle to Australia. How did it come about?
I think it was a slow release over many years. And I always give ultimate credit to my dad, who in the early 70s left his home in a Land Rover and drove down to Cape Town. And it was like the stories of what he got up to on that trip. By the way, it took him about, I can't quite remember how long. I think it took him about 6 months to get down to, actually it was Joburg. Got down there, and then but then he was away for 4 years. He went and worked in the sugar cane up in northeast Australia. Worked on a farm in your neck of the woods in Te Puke in North Island of New Zealand. So it was that kind of those stories of his travels that really made me want to go and do a trip like this. And then of course I had to do one better, so I had to go on a bike instead of going a Land Rover.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about your father being an adventurer, obviously in that state. Did it, and I'm going to get deep with you here because I'm interested to know the psychology here. Was it something that you felt as though you had to live up to in some kind of way?
No, I don't think so. I
No.
really don't think it wasn't living up to. It was literally the stories of his trip made me excited to go and explore the world on my own. So no, I don't think it was needing to live up to it at all. Actually.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. But it's an interesting question. I've never really considered it, to be honest. So I will consider it after this. But it's never occurred to me that. No, it's always been. I've always just thought, God, those stories were great, and I'd love to go and experience the places that he did. I mean, it was one of the reasons I tried to go down some of Africa because he'd gone down there, and I sort of had always wanted to go and experience the Sudanese desert and the mountains of Ethiopia and that kind of thing. I mean, he told stories like breaking down in the middle of nowhere in Ethiopia, and his mate had to ride a donkey for 2 days to go and get petrol, stuff like that. Well, it always made me just want to go and have adventures like that.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, fantastic. So back to the trip, and you're shooting across Europe, and I'm interested to know kind of, when did it come to the realization where you started to forget about the knee problems and the friends and everybody left behind? You started really connecting with humanity in the world that was around you. I guess being on a bike, you're using all of your senses every day. You're getting to smell places, touch places, and be up close and personal with people. When did that start really having an impact on you? How long into the trip?
Good question. I think, if I'm honest, probably quite a while. I mean, the sort of daily routine came very quickly, and I was very happy cycling through Europe, and I was, by the time I got to sort of Germany, southern Germany, certainly I was in the rhythm. So that was a good 3 weeks or so in, and I was meeting nice people and that kind of thing. Because you do, I mean, when you're on your bike, you meet a lot of people. You get a chance to speak to a lot of people when you stop, and they look at what you're carrying, and they're like, "Blimey, where are you off to?" And you go, "Australia." And they go, "Wow, you're a long way from Australia, mate." So there's that. But I think, to be honest, it was when I left, when I got into Eastern Europe, I felt a much greater connection with the places that I was cycling through and the people that I came into contact with. And I think that's something that, I sort of, if I'm honest, I feel it even these days. I spend a lot of time in Romania these days, and I find that it's so much sort of easier to connect with people with strangers. What I'm saying, by the way, so much easier to connect with strangers when you get to places like that where there's not this sort of I don't know how to explain it, but where it feels very foreign. It feels increasingly foreign for an Englishman to be in places like that, and that's where I began sort of really connecting with people and relaxing into the journey.
What did you start to learn about yourself as a young guy, as a human being out there in the world, as the journey evolved? What were some of the things that you, I guess, didn't realise that you were capable of when you were back in Cookham in your early life?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, realising what you're capable of, really. And the main thing I always think back to is that ability to control your emotions. I mean, I've talked about crying and stuff like that. I'm not talking about on that sort of level, but my highs and lows were, I sort of learned to control them, which helped me get on with the trip and helped me have get on with the adventure. Because although it's great fun, it's great fun. I found the cycling, I found the sort of mental side of it pretty tough, like being on your own, basically the whole time, for day after day in the saddle, cycling 100 kilometers. And actually, it didn't work for me. It wouldn't have worked for me if I had very big highs and very big lows. So during that year, I controlled without particularly thinking about it, but I learned to control my highs and lows, so that the highs were never too high, but then the lows were never too low. And of course, the highs never being too high, that was a bit of a trade-off, because it's nice to have great highs, but it's not nice to then sort of have great lows as well. So that was something I learned to sort of, you just deal with stuff that's thrown at you. Someone, I don't know, we're talking later in the trip here, but like throwing a glass of urine on you. Someone did that in India, or like beeping, or like in Bulgaria, quite a few people would beep their horns as they went past and like swerve towards you.
Right.
Just, I don't know whether they're drunk or what, but I didn't used to get, back in England, I would have probably got cross with people if they'd done that. But I sort of learnt to like, okay, this is just what happens. There are many more nice people in the world. There are many more people who are being supportive and friendly to the few idiots who are not being so. And I learnt to sort of control the way I reacted.
Yeah, but on the flip side of that, having urine thrown over you, you could say that Chris Froome in the Tour de France had the same thing, right?
There you go. So, and he controlled his emotions, I suspect, when that happened. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. What about the bike? How did the bike handle the trip in terms of mechanical issues and all the rest of it? Was it a case of you went long times between issues, or was it breaking down all the time?
I don't know what you're worrying about the bike for. I mean, honestly, you should be worrying about me, not the bike. The bike was fine. No, the bike had the bike was fine. I had to wait a couple of weeks in Damascus for a part actually, and that was pretty much the only major issue. My bike rack fell off, but I managed to get it welded back on in Budapest, and then this bottom bracket went in Syria, so I was stuck for a couple of weeks in Damascus, but I didn't complain about that. Damascus was an absolutely amazing place to be stuck. So it wouldn't be these days, of course, but it was a fantastic city, and Syria was an amazing country to explore, which I did. Left my bike in Damascus and headed off exploring out in the desert. It was great.
So getting back to what you said before about the good people and the minority of ones that were idiots, did you find that the ride was teaching you to trust people more, trust the universe more?
Yeah, definitely. One of the big takeaways from my trip was that 99% people are incredibly kind, just very friendly, and trust, and you're able to trust people. So I just trusted everyone I came into contact with, and by that I mean, I didn't used to hide I let people look after my bike. I let people ride my bike. I wasn't worried what would happen if something was stolen. Obviously I used to lock it up occasionally, but after sort of Eastern Europe, after Europe, really, I didn't really lock it. I just let people sort of come in, and if you invite people in, you sort of get more out of the experience. I left my bike for 2 weeks with a guy in India who was sitting. I basically went up to this restaurant owner, and I said, "Look, is there any chance I could leave my bike here for?" Actually, it was probably about a week. For about a week. I wanted to head down to Goa and go and stay on the beach for a bit. But it was out of my way, so I left my bike, went up to this restaurant owner, and I said, "Any chance you can look after my bike and some of my bags for a week?" And he ushered over one of his waiters or people helping in the restaurant, and gave him the job of looking after my bike for that week. And I came back a week later, and the guy was sitting in the corner of the restaurant next to my bike with really polished, like the cleanest it had been ever. And then my bags sitting next to it, and he'd just been looking after it.
Do you know if he had any food during that week?
Yeah, I don't know if they'd let him leave the seat to sort of like feed himself or go to the loo or anything. Anyway, but no, the point being, if that bike was worth a lot of money, and it was just nice, like moments like that where I was just restored my faith in humanity. There were other episodes, like when I was trying to camp this one time in sort of the middle of nowhere in Turkey, and I'd just been chased by some dogs, and I arrived in this village, and it was just starting to snow, and I was trying to put my tent up in this sort of village courtyard thing, and this man came along, and we'd shared not a word of common language, but he just ushered me over to this building, and I thought, well, okay, I'll just follow him, see what he's on about. And he took me to the mosque, and he took me into a side room, and there were blankets and a little stove, a soba, a wood burner in the middle of the room, and he let me sleep there. He went away, came back with a load of logs, lit the fire, and left me there, and I took down my tent and went to sleep in there. It's those sorts of things that were just magic. Very good memories.
Did the ride teach you to trust yourself more?
It's a good question. Yeah, trust my judgment and that kind of thing.
Intuition, judgment.
Yeah. Whether I'd say more, I don't know. But I certainly, I did on that. Yeah, I did. I haven't really thought about that before. But on my ride, I certainly just trusted my judgment. You have to, right? You can't. You've sort of you've got no choice. You have to make decisions, and it's going a bit far to say you live or die by them, but you certainly you have a good time if you make the right decision, and you have a pretty crappy time if you don't. if you take the wrong turn and all that kind of stuff. And also with people, you have to. Yeah, I suppose you look some people in the eye and you think, no, probably not going to trust you. But generally, people are there to be trusted, and you get a lot more out of the relationship, I think, if you do.
Was there any time during the trip you didn't think you'd make it to Australia?
The only time really I felt like it was in danger of ending was when I got dengue fever in Thailand, and I was incredibly weak, and the doctor there said you should not be cycling for at least 3 months. You shouldn't be doing serious exercise for at least 3 months. And I thought, this is a shame. It looks like it's over. But then I had a good chat with a friend who was just down the road in Bangkok, and she was in the process of moving back from Australia. She was living in Sydney, moving home, and she was in Bangkok, and she said, "Look, I'll come and meet you, and we'll just cycle slowly southwards." So we did. So that was the only time really that I thought it might not happen. I mean, I was 68 kilograms at the time,
wow.
which was lighter than my bike when I had a full load, with all the water and everything. And I'm not particularly fat now, and I'm 90 kilograms. So it's a lot. I've lost a lot of weight.
So you completely ignored the Thai doctor's advice?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
And that's why we're having this podcast.
It's wonder you're still in lockdown today. You're not out roaming around the streets of London.
I'm a rule follower. I'm definitely a rule follower. But these days, but maybe it's parenthood that's made me so.
Okay, we've got the health issues. Any other health issues on the way? Was that the last hurrah as far as the body having a problem?
Yeah, I was remarkably fit throughout that whole year. Actually, my knee issue that I've touched on was the only physical issue I had for that whole trip. And I'm someone who I have back in the day and still do have a bad back. Always got something wrong with me just from a lifetime of sport, really. But no, that year I was just so comfortable and so sort of in tune with my body. It was great.
You've come to the end of part 1 of a 2-part story with Oli Broom about his epic cycling adventure from the UK to Australia to watch a cricket match. Tune into part 2 to listen to see what happens next.